All right. Well, it's a little after 3 o'clock. We want to just welcome everybody to our webinar today. As I just mentioned, as people continue to join us, this is the first of a two-part series on working remotely, working virtually, as we say at CANA Advisors. My name is Liz Cranston. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of CANA Advisors. And just a little bit about our company. We have been in business over 10 years. We are based in Northern Virginia, and we, since the day we opened our doors, have been a virtual company, so 100% virtual. I like to say that we are experts in many ways, our team, but most of us, if not all of us, are expert practitioners of working virtually. So today, we're excited to share with you some of our perspectives and insights on working virtually with our tips and perspectives in mind. One of the reasons we started CANA, just to give you a little backdrop, CANA Advisors, we started it as a virtual business over 10 years ago. It was rooted in some business decisions, controlling costs. But we found more importantly, it was rooted in the idea that working virtual can build space and can build an ability to get work done better. And we have found that to be true over time, and that's why we're here today to talk about what we have to share on what makes this company successful in a virtual fashion. So what we do as a small business, to give that background, is that we are a small business and we provide analytics and logistics operations solutions to both federal government and commercial businesses. And we do that by providing services, and we do that providing virtual services. I think it's worth noting that we do in-person discussions and meetings with our clients and our customers, but that's only about 10% of what we do as a business. And how we do it, the what is those services, those analytics and logistics operation services. The what is the piece of the puzzle that we're going to talk about today, which is how do we do it well virtually as a 100% virtual company with employees dispersed throughout the United States. But I think what's equally and most important to talk about, or not equally, but most important to talk about, is why we do it. What is our why statement? Who are we at CANA, and what drives us to be successful virtually? I want to share with you that we do have an articulated why statement at CANA Advisors, and this is it. It's to create an environment that allows our team and clients more time to focus on the things that matter most. So we're not driving in our cars in rush hour. We're not spending our hour in the morning and putting on a suit and tie. What we're doing is we're focusing on providing the best solutions, the best services virtually to our customers and clients so that it creates space for them while at the same time we're able to create space. So it's a very symbiotic relationship. So today, again, you're going to hear from a group of people that I consider practitioners, expert practitioners of working virtually. So we're going to kick off with a short presentation that's going to talk about tools and tips and best practices working the CANA virtual way. And then we're going to follow with a moderated panel where we're going to discuss certain insights and perspectives on working virtually, also the challenges and the successes that we've had working virtually. I will say that many companies are talking about working virtually today. Obviously, with the current circumstances in our world, a lot of us are working from home, if not many of us. And there are challenges to make that conversion so quickly. What is different about us is that this is what we do. This is what we have always done. And so we feel like we have definitely a platform of experience to share with you that is extremely authentic and is true to not only our why statement, but also is true to what we're talking about today and sharing with you. At any times, I want to just note that you can ask questions and in our chat feature within this webinar, and you can see at the bottom of your screen the ability to do that. And at the end of our moderated panel, we're going to open it up to ask those questions of our panel, as well as our presenter, who I'll introduce in a moment, so we can answer those questions for you. So with no further ado, I want to introduce our first presenter. His name is Walt DeGrange. He's the Director of Analytics Capabilities at CANA Advisors. In this role, he recruits, he develops, and enables a team of analytics and logistics operations professionals to produce high-level analytics products across our federal and commercial domains. I should also note that Walt is a very avid beach volleyball player, and he resides in Raleigh, North Carolina. So I'd like to turn it over to Walt.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Liz. If anybody will note, I don't have a tan right now with the current situation. Unfortunately, the beach volleyball and all organized sports outdoors have been very rare to come by. So withstanding that, yeah, I have been with CANA Advisors for about 5.5 years. And my background before then was 21 years in the Navy. And needless to say, the military in general is you don't work virtually, and people need to have eyes on to make sure you're doing what you should be doing. So it was a totally different environment for me, moving from the military to virtual. My history working virtual is I have worked out of a 2-bedroom apartment. I have worked while we waited for our house to get renovated. Currently, I'm in a very nice purpose-built office. I do also travel quite a bit as far as for professional societies and for client visits and such. So I've worked out of hotel rooms, coffee shops, co-work facilities, and probably the coolest place I've ever worked was I live in Chapel Hill, so I get to go to Durham Bulls games, if anybody remembers the film Bull Durham. So I actually did a meeting online from center field with the game going on behind me. And I just told everybody on the webinar to please tell me if there was a home run ball that was going to hit me in the head. But of course, as we all know, that's dead center. So probability of that happening is pretty low. So obviously been to a lot of places and worked virtually a lot of different ways. So like Liz had mentioned, the culture at CANA is built from the ground up to be virtual. And if anybody has read the Ben Horowitz book, What You Do Is Who You Are, he emphasizes it's about culture in Silicon Valley and culture in organizations in general. Actions equal culture. So he gives an example of a CEO that basically of a large organization that says the culture at this organization is that we show up to meetings early. And then the CEO shows up to every meeting 15 minutes late. So basically, the culture of that organization is that the CEO shows up late to meetings, but the expectation is everybody else shows up to the meetings early. So as you can see, no matter what the culture says, what people do is actually the real culture at that organization. So we have to take that in consideration when you're working virtually. So everything that we do from the ground up is to support a virtual work environment for our folks. And many folks that have been in our current situation have asked me, it's like, are there any tips or tricks? Obviously, we'll be presenting some of those to you today. One of the biggest ones, though, is if you move from working in person to working virtually, obviously you don't have the advantage of going back in time and screening everybody to make sure that they're a good fit for working virtually. So I acknowledge that fact. What do we look for those folks, or what can you sort of try to enhance in the folks that you already have working virtually or team members? And I would say the obvious picks are independence, self-reliance. And also, I would say that, and we'll get into this a little later, is the ability to use tools and reach out and not be that person against the world, right? Just because you are working from a home office or potentially alone in a co-work facility doesn't mean you're alone. And the two key recipes we have for this is the team accountability. So everybody is held accountable to a team for their responsibilities on either projects or internal work or such. And then we have an individual contribution. So everybody is individually contributing and held accountable at the team level. And this is, with my experience over the past 5.5 years, if somebody is not contributing individually, and sometimes this happens, I mean, it's happened in my past that you have folks that are team members that may just come to work. They may be the nicest people, very pleasant, but you know, they're just coming to work. And you don't know what they're contributing, right, to the organization. If you are working, if your entire team is working virtually, those people will stand out. There's nowhere to hide when you work virtually. The individual contribution, you know, is on a weekly, daily, monthly basis, has to be there. If you haven't heard from Walt for a month or two, then that probably means that Walt is not contributing. So some of the other keys, communication, this cannot be overemphasized. Everybody on our team calls it over communication. In an in-person environment, you may have casual run-ins with folks, or be able to communicate in a non-formal fashion, such as, you know, walking in from the parking lot and such. That doesn't exist in the in the virtual world. So basically, you have to make sure that if, you know, there's an email, perhaps you follow up with a text chat, or if you sense any confusion, then you follow up with a video chat. So that's the key is any kind of uncomfortableness that you may feel that somebody didn't receive the communication or was misunderstood, it has to be reinforced with another mechanism. And when you think about it, this is probably best practices for if you are in an in-person office also. It's just that there are many more opportunities. For instance, at the soda machine or at the coffee machine to say, hey, Walt, I sent you an email this morning. What do you think about it? And such. The other piece for communication is one-on-one conversations. So I know that there's been a proliferation of people that, if you just do a Google search right now, there's a million hits on, you know, using Zoom, using GoToMeeting, using Google Hangout Meets. These are all great tools. And yes, you can have up to 100 participants, you know, or 200 participants, or 300 participants on one Zoom call. And that's all awesome. However, it all comes back to you need to use the one-on-one conversations. This allows for the direct communication of two individuals, and using video, you can actually get the cues. You know, you can't get all the cues you can get in person. However, it's a lot more, the information flow isn't quite as chopped up as it would be using either a text chat or even a phone. And these conversations, in my experience, have been the most productive time-wise. So this leads us to the next point, meeting control. Again, just because you have all these tools, and perhaps in person you had a lot of meetings, right? So there seems to be, again, a proliferation of like, well, now I can have more meetings and it's easy to schedule meetings. And this is so cool seeing everybody, you know, like the Brady Bunch on one screen. There has to be, you know, here at CANA, we are very cognizant about how many meetings we have. If you only have one meeting with each person, but that person has other meetings with other people, then you could come into a situation where everybody is just having meetings all week, right? And nobody's actually doing anything. So we always ask our team members to kind of challenge themselves to say, you know, why are we having this meeting? How long should it be? Who should be there, right? Just don't invite everybody just because we can. And can the meeting be answered another way, another communication format? So either through text, email, or perhaps a quick one-on-one conversation. You know, perhaps I want to call a meeting with 5 people, but if I had a 5 or 10 minute conversation with each one of them, I would, you know, come to the same answer or solution. So Again, this is a popular subject out on the internet right now. What tools and techniques for communications that are being used. We prefer at CANA to use chat and video. That's our two main ways to communicate. We're a Google Suite company, so we use Google Hangout Chat, Google Hangout Meet as our two main things. I mean, there are many solutions out there provided by a multitude of companies. So the way that we use these are typically that we try to use chat when at all possible. And that circumvents many of the small questions or sharing information. And then if the chat is becoming a little confusing or needs more explanation, we immediately switch over to video. And Google Hangout Chat has a nice feature where you can just create a video link, and whoever is involved in that chat thread or room can join immediately. So whether that's one-on-one, a group of 3 people, and then you can immediately talk about that subject, come to a quick resolution, and then move on. So we realize there are just some things that, again, text chat is just not going to be able to answer. The other piece of it is inclusion for your communication tools. So you want to make sure that everybody can use the tools, they're very comfortable with them. And again, anybody at the company can call, if they're having frustration or don't think that they're getting their answer via chat, can move to the video. The other piece of using these communication tools is managing interruptions. So if anybody out there has been on a video call and you have, let's say 30 people or 40 people, there's always this, everybody there'll be a silent moment, and then there'll be like 10 people start talking at the same time. So, or worse, somebody's talking and then somebody else just starts talking. And that may be because of a lag in audio via, due to the internet, or it may just be the person who's just trying to interrupt the other person. So the online communication gets very confusing at times. So, and the other piece of this is that we actually, when we have a day one experience with our folks coming, team members coming on board, we run them through, training for how to manage interruptions. We use techniques such as handoffs, and also be comfortable with silence, right? If there's 5 seconds of silence when you're on a video call, or when you're on a teleconference call at CANA, nobody freaks out. That you probably would be a little more uncomfortable if you're in person. Everybody would just be staring at everybody. But that's life in the virtual world, right? Because of connectivity and some other issues, there may be these silent moments, and that's okay. That's just, again, the realities of being a company like this. The other piece is that if you have folks that are always wanting to talk over, then we have a exercise where we actually have people wait till the person is finished and then count to 5. And that may seem like it's kind of old school, but it actually works. So, if you have some folks that maybe are having some issues, and when you know that this is working is when you have that silence, and then there may be talk over then. That's kind of the best case scenario, because then everybody's trying to be respectful, but you may still have multiple people wanting to contribute to the conversation, which that's great, and then of course you got to deconflict that. But yeah, that's one of the many challenges, and probably if you can figure that one out, the meetings will run really well. Our tech stack here, no surprises. Many of you, there are a multitude of software solutions out there. This is, for knowledge sharing, we use Evernote. For collaboration, like I mentioned, we're a Google Suite client. For version control, of course, we do a lot of software development and analytics model development. So we use Git for our version control. And for our project management, we use Jira. And again, a lot of these tools you will use in an in-person office or traditional office. I would say that CANA exploits, in an in-person office, you may only exploit like 30 to 40% of the functionality of these tools. When you're virtual, you probably need to exploit probably 80 to 90%. So of the functionality, and sometimes that takes additional research and to collaborate virtually. So again, being virtual, the cool part about the virtual environment is that it really doesn't matter where you are, you work the same. So whether you're at home or on the road, basically, as long as you have an internet connection, you're good to go, right? So we do have some standards when we communicate virtually, especially since we really like to communicate via video. So we're always aware of our background. A lot of times, the funny story here is that in coffee shops, if you have a window that's behind you and the sun's coming in, it'll wash you out. And then we call it the witness protection shot. Your face will be totally blacked out, like in those old 2020s or news footages where they're trying to protect the identity of the person talking. So you have to be aware of that kind of stuff. And again, we are very open about where we are. So, and we'll talk about that in a third point. Many folks, the importance of home life, work-life boundaries, and this is, super important. To go to the extreme, you could have a work office that, that is a strategy for some team members where only work happens there. And then it's kind of like having an office that's inside your home, and you turn off your computer, you walk out your door, and that your work life is done and your home life starts. Other folks are a little more flexible about that. I know myself, if I do have a dedicated office, but I also have a standing desk in the sunroom. I've worked from the kitchen table, and I've worked outside when it's nice weather and out on the deck. So I like to move around. A lot of times if I'm doing creative work, perhaps outside is a better setting. But again, if I have a client meeting, then perhaps, I want a more quiet environment inside my office. And the big thing about us, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, is that we're very proud about where we work from. And so we are cognizant of where we're working from. So if we are at a coffee shop, we're going to mention that at the beginning of the meeting. And then we actually do kind of a sound check. I know there's a lot of great tech out there. A lot of the earphones cancel a lot of the sound now. We'll typically just ask everybody online, hey, is the ambient noise, too loud? Can you hear me? And just go from there. Like I mentioned when I was at the baseball game, if you hear a big cheer, probably, tell me or don't be alarmed because that means something good has happened for the home team. So putting it all together, this is kind of when we execute the projects or when we execute analytics or when we execute our software development, working virtually, the project leads, project managers, leaders of in the organization have to be aware of the barriers to execution, and these are going to be different, okay, than barriers that you may have in an office. So the barriers could be the internet connectivity in a city has gone down, or a certain section of the city. So there could be other things. We've had instances where people may have had their basements flooded, or house issues. So we've had also weather issues, right? Where some of our team members have had a hurricane or tornadoes to deal with. So there are some barriers that may be very unique. So it's not going to take your entire team out, but you may have one or two key members that may not be able, or may need some alternate plans on how to execute virtually. The other piece that's key is sharing knowledge. So we do this by a monthly, we do it a few ways. We do it by a monthly CANA Analytics Roundtable, where we have 3 10-minute briefs, 1 20-minute brief, and then kind of a summary 10-minute session. And that allows team members to share if they've been to any interesting conferences or used any interesting techniques recently. And it also brings everybody together just to share what the company's been up to in some of the projects. We also have chat rooms for sharing knowledge. I mean, that's a great way to get out there and share. The other key piece of this is celebrating success. So virtually, it's kind of easy just to keep doing what you're doing, and there has to be, like, you stop at a certain point and maybe have a virtual happy hour or virtual celebration. We do this every time somebody comes on board. We have kind of a virtual meet and greet. So we always are looking for reasons to celebrate and bring everybody together, and make sure everybody knows about those successes. Client engagement. So just because you're virtual doesn't necessarily mean you're disconnected from everybody, right? Like I mentioned before, we do have standards for virtual meetings and presentations. We enjoy doing site visits, right? And that's something obviously right now you can't do, but that's very important for CANA. We like to meet people in person. Just because we have made the decision to work virtually doesn't mean that we're all introverts and want to lock ourselves away. So it's very important for us to get out and meet with clients and make sure that they know we're three-dimensional. That's always a joke we have. And then we also like to network in person for local, like, meetup events and with professional societies. So that's important for many of us professionally, and just to get out of the house and meet somebody locally who's also in your career field is really, really nice. And the last thing is team building. So we do make space for non-work related issues. We have a water cooler chat thread. And this is important because there is no way for us to talk about Monday morning football, or Monday night football and Tuesday mornings when you're virtual, unless you make room for that, right? And the other piece of this is we do fantasy football. We have a very competitive fantasy football league. And again, we connect in person with offsites and client site visits. So we take time once a year to go off and meet in person in 3 dimensions. The other thing is, whenever we go to a client site, we will take that time and do a special dinner or go out and do a special event with a subset of us, so that, again, we take that time, treat that time very special. We do the all hands meetings, so we get everybody together to disseminate information virtually. And then we find that this team building, you can't build the trust and make sure that everybody knows everybody as real people without this, the non-work piece, and then connecting in person. And with that is the end of my presentation. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them into the Q&A section, and we'll answer those at the end of the panel session. And I'm going to turn this back over to Liz. Thanks.
you, Walt. Thank you very much. That was great. I always love hearing it because I learn new things every day about what we're doing, and I'm happy about them. Let's just put it that way. The next stage is going to be the moderated panel that I alluded to when I did my introduction, and we have 3 CANA-ers who will be taking part in that panel. The first is Joe Marino. Joe is our Director of Development at CANA Advisors. In this position, he oversees software engineering teams and processes. Joe is a former Marine Corps supply officer, so URA, and he worked as a software engineer at Apple from 1998 to 2007. Joe has a lot of experience working from home or co-working offices for over a decade, and he resides in Southern California. So welcome, Joe. We also have Kim Mamala join us today. She is a senior operations research analyst at CANA Advisors. She's been with us for over 6 years. She mainly supports our Department of Defense clients, but she also supports our commercial clients. She has a bachelor's in mathematics and an MBA and a master's in operations research. She lives in Utah, and to share a little bit about her, she's an avid outdoors enthusiast and enjoys trail running and assortment of different outdoor activities. She also has our reigning champion pull-up competition leaderboard for what it's worth. Finally, we have Stephanie Allison joining us. She is our senior software development analyst. She's approaching 1 year with CANA Advisors. She has worked virtually for several years throughout her career, supporting both government and commercial clients. She holds an MBA along with a Bachelor's of Science in both Computer Information Systems Management and Organizational Leadership. She lives in Pennsylvania, and she enjoys camping, hiking, and kayaking with her family. So we thought to share that little bit about her. So thank you to the 3 CANA-ers that are joining us on our panel today. So I wanted to start with a couple of questions about the culture at CANA. So this is for all 3 of you. The question is, and we'll start with Joe, is how would you describe CANA's culture?
Thank you, Liz. Bear with me for a moment as I have a long-winded answer about the CANA culture, both fundamentally and technically. Like fundamentally, CANA Advisors is an above and beyond analytics and logistics company made up of a core of experienced professionals, and it's unlike any I've worked with in the past, and we all recognize our culture's uniqueness. But in our specific case, all of our work time is flex time, as long as we deliver on our projects, attend our meetings, and log about 180 hours per month. This means, as Walt mentioned, we can work from anywhere. So as long as we have a reliable internet connection and quiet work conditions, it's not hard for me to maintain a professional work environment, right? And I'm giving this background because it's a key part of our culture technically. As Walt mentioned, at CANA, we use Google G Suite's Business Edition, and nearly all of our meetings are face-to-face via video. For me, that means that at least once a week, I get to see everyone working across our program. And once a day, I see everyone working on projects via our daily scrums. So being virtual in our culture allows a lot of flexibility. 2 weeks ago, we at CANA, we moved our annual offsite from Pennsylvania to cyberspace without skipping a beat. We even ended each day of our offsite with a virtual happy hour. So socializing virtually is an excellent option. And at CANA, it's not difficult for us to stay connected while apart. So that's my answer to your question.
Well, thank you. Kim, do you have anything to add?
Yes, when I think of our culture, I think of the life-work balance. I think that term is thrown around a lot out there, but since I started nearly 6 years ago, that has always been the case, the life-work balance. And working virtually really allows that. As Joe touched upon with the flex time, it allows me to work a certain schedule around my life, my family life, my outdoor activity life, just any of that. So I think of it as a life-work balance. The other experience I've also had is compared to other companies I worked for, is it's a very relaxed culture. And I want to say relaxed, not as in we don't get our work done, but relaxed in I can just go to Liz and ask her a question, even though she's the highest level there. Where in former companies, you have to talk to your manager who talks to the next level management to the next level, where it's so much more relaxed in that aspect. And I love that. It feels more like just a kind of a family environment, and it's great.
Thanks, Kim. Appreciate the shout out too. How about you, Stephanie? What would you add?
The first word that comes to mind when I think about CANA's culture is empowerment. I think that our culture really allows each employee to be very empowered in using our own creativity to develop solutions, and allows us to be really flexible in how we work to be more productive as an individual. It's not pushed, at a corporate level to work in a certain manner. Like Joe and Kim both mentioned, the schedule is flexible, working at your own time in your own location. And I think that as a team, I feel like we accomplish a lot more because our culture focuses on the value that we add, not just on the hours that we work or that we're sitting in an office space working in a building altogether. So just very empowering to allow us to kind of be individuals and contribute to the company and to our clients and our work, how best suits us and how we can best serve the company and our client.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Stephanie. Well, this leads to the next question that I wanted to pose to all three of you, and it's very relevant to our time right now with the COVID-19 coronavirus outbreak, which our hearts and our prayers go out to everyone and anyone affected by it. And that is, how has your virtual routine been impacted by the self-isolation practices in place to combat the spread of the virus? So I'd like to start with Joe, please.
Well, answering this question is very personal to each of us, right? Based on our situation. I'm lucky I probably have it easier since I live alone, no kids, no pets. But for me, I've worked virtually since my days at Apple about 15, 20 years ago. And there hasn't been a lot of change other than the fact that my workday begins a little earlier since most of my coworkers are on the East Coast. But what really helps all that is our face-to-face meetings. So it hasn't involved much because I was already there, and I've noticed a lot of people at the company, right, coming on board seem to fit in very well. So that's my answer.
How about you, Stephanie?
The ways that it's changed the most for me, and I imagine a lot of other folks who are either listening in or might listen to this later, there are more people working from home, number one, and number two, a lot of schools are closed. So for me, I do have 2 children and a spouse. Having more people in the house as opposed to just me and my dog, who is the only other person usually here during the day, it's a little bit different as far as just making sure my door to my office is closed a little bit more often, managing the noise, and just what's really nice about CANA and our culture is that flexibility, because now that maybe the kids need me to step away for a minute to make lunch where that wasn't the case before, I can still get online later in the evening and catch up on any work or anything like that. And then as far as having a spouse at home who's also working but works from home at some points, it's just a matter of kind of finding that right space in your office to continue to work and be productive and uninterrupted, especially for meetings, and just balancing that space out so you both have time to do that and have the focus that you need to.
Great. How about you, Kim?
The impact for me is similar to Stephanie. Is having a child at home now. She's younger, and where I am in Utah, we have to homeschool her. We have a certain requirements we have to meet. So it's kind of attending to that while also doing my work. And I'm a very routine person, and my whole routine has been thrown. I don't have a set schedule yet, where before I had a set schedule, I knew that from 7 to 8 I'm doing this and doing this and doing this, and that is out the window because now my child's home all day. And then it's the interruptions and just coping with more interruptions, whereas before it was just me, it was quiet, maybe a doorbell ring here and there, but that's it. So that's what those have been my challenges so far.
I completely relate. Thank you for sharing. Well, what I'd like to do next is I want to focus on some of our technical supports, how we work technically. So these questions are going to be for our technical and our developer side of the house, which is Kim and Stephanie. So I'll just ask this question and then the two of you can answer in turn. I believe this is very relevant to probably many people on the call. And that is that sometimes nothing beats a whiteboard style problem solving session. How do you make space for that in this remote development team environment?
I'll go first. I'm sorry. For me, whiteboarding is very critical. There's comes to points where I really need to think through what I'm doing, a problem I'm solving. And a lot of times having others' input is important, right? So what I do, and I do think this is one of my biggest challenges, but what I do is I do have my own whiteboard, and I actually do whiteboard it out. When I'm working with somebody, I could take a picture of that and send it through chat and then have them think about it. And then we'll meet online later through video chat once we both had time to digest it, come up with ideas. That seems to be the best way to do it. If I don't do that, then there's just a lot of chat going back and forth, the typing kind of chat, and things get misconstrued or misunderstood. And then that's when we go to the video chat. But I think the whiteboard with a picture of what you're thinking is a lot more efficient.
Stephanie.
A little bit the opposite of Kim, where she likes to have things handwritten out and things on a whiteboard. I do like to have things electronically. The less paper on my desk, the better, the more organized I feel. So the whiteboard isn't too much of a problem for me because I love using tools that will allow you to do that kind of thing online. And I think that CANA does a great job of identifying the tools that work best for us as a team and utilize them to their full capacity. So I think video teleconferencing and collaborative tools are the key here. You know, no matter what side of the house you're on, whether you like to have things handwritten or electronic. So going back to what Walt said in his presentation, communication and the tools are where it's at. Being able to see each other face to face, like Kim said, I think makes a huge difference for communication. It's a lot easier to talk to each other. Chat is great. Like we use a Hangout chat, and even a phone call is good, but I think just being able to see each other face to face makes all the difference. And then using those tools like the Google Hangout chat, Jira for tasking, for project planning, and just kind of keeping everybody on the same page are phenomenal for keeping things moving forward for the project.
I actually was talking to a peer and I was saying that working virtually, I think I see people more than if I was working in an office, a traditional office space. So I definitely agree with what you're saying. Well, let me build upon that and send this back to Kim, because Stephanie talked about tools. So can you speak to some of those tools a little bit more specifically, of what you use for collaboration, Kim, and what you find that works best for you?
Yes, so for us, using the G Suite, that is the primary tool, all of the tools within the G Suite. The chat is definitely what I use most. It's just easy. You know, it's right at your hands. You could just type your question. You see who's online and who's not online. You know who to go to. So I'd say that. And then having the G Suite, it almost lets you have, I guess, a repository, because it keeps a history. So you could go back and search old chats. If you use Google Docs for collaboration or Sheets, there's always a history there. And so I really do like that. And the other part with those kinds of tools is more than one person could edit at a time. And that to me is very important, because working in a virtual environment, you have people with different time zones. And so you never know when someone's working. With our flex time, some people work very well and they work late into the evenings. Other people are early birds like me, where I could be up at 4 in the morning working. And so it allows anybody to be in there at any time, and you're not saving over people's changes. And so I think that is very key when you're working as a team, spread out everywhere. And video chat, of course. Through chat, you could just pop the video button and you're talking to that person. Because a lot of times, as I said before, things get misconstrued when you're typing text. So you just pop that video button and there you are, you're talking and it's resolved.
Right, right. I'd also throw in that just a good old-fashioned phone call works just as well. And it does, it's sort of like mixing up an exercise routine. You know, you have chat, you have video, you have all these different, you know, means, but the phone still exists. And sometimes that's very freeing in of itself because you don't have to get dressed up or brush your hair perhaps. But thank you, Kim. Well, let's turn this a little bit back over to the management function. I want to ask this question of Joe as our Director of Development. Joe, how do you tailor your management style to leading a remote team?
So leadership is leadership, regardless if it's military or civilian or real life or virtual, right? The fundamentals of leadership are key. And that's what a manager does, right? Set the example. I would say in this environment, people have that independence. So focus on the results before the processes, and then clearly define what it means to have something done to set the expectation, right? The other parts of managing people or leadership, still apply. If a coworker isn't meeting expectations, then have a heart-to-heart conversation. These are difficult conversations, but you want to begin the conversation with clarity. For example, you're not meeting expectations and here's why, and then listen empathetically. And also don't forget to celebrate small successes, which could be something as simple as someone reaching a stretch goal on a task, because those are important. And the supervision part is important too, right? Inspect what you expect, right? Take a peek, but remember, nose in, fingers out, right? You don't want to micromanage, you want to supervise. And the key that I've seen all this is just hiring people who not only understand your culture, but are enthusiastic about it and are a good fit.
Well, let me build on that a little bit. How do you, just kind of take this a little farther, how do you, in your role as a leader or manager at CANA, how do you create a culture that maintains both accountability and independence?
Wow. So the independence is there by the nature of the company. Like they being coworkers can work when they want. And then accountability is done by, we do it through JIRA by clearly defining what a specific task means to be done. So there's no misunderstanding. So as we've said over and over again, communications is key. And instead of walking over to coworker's desk, as everyone else has mentioned, it's extremely easy to pop up on chat and just click a button and be face to face very quickly. So doing that is what I've discovered is important. And because we've hired with that in mind, it's always been a good fit with the company.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate everybody's comments so far. I want to ask a more specific question that has to do with, I'm sorry, Joe, for you, I have one more question, sorry. And that is, what do you see differently in the in-person versus virtual management? I think you touched upon that, but can you elaborate a little bit more?
So one thing that I've noticed is we have to deal with a lot of interruptions that you normally wouldn't deal with in the office, whether it's a dog barking, a baby crying, the doorbell ringing, or another chat coming in while you're having a meeting. But one thing is to establish a face-to-face meeting, it's just a little harder in the virtual environment than walking over to someone's desk and tapping on the shoulder. So my point there is there's less one-on-one interruptions because there's a little higher cost of someone answering a chat, responding, opening a video, and starting that. And that a lot of times helps minimize person-to-person interruptions, if that makes sense. So that's something that I've noticed.
It does. Well, I have a final question for our panelists, and this goes for all three of you, so if you can answer in turn. And that is, what tips would you give to teams who are new to remote work for maintaining a strong remote culture? And I'll start with Joe.
Well, you need to get it set up technically and establish some guidelines. We do that at CANA because everyone's first day experience, Walt takes us through things you don't even think about, the background noise in your environment, the background noise of you typing, things like that. So establishing that is key. Little tips that I've noticed when I'm presenting on Google Meet, I have to share my screen, so I'll have a second screen set up and I'll see what I'm presenting while I'm talking to the group. So establishing and promulgating, the best practices to get other people on board and sharing those and always working to improve and figure out a better way to do it is what I would recommend.
Great. Kim, how about you?
I would say to use the collaboration tools that are available, whether they're the ones that we spoke of that we use or something else that you find. Don't be afraid to collaborate just because you're in different houses, different locations everywhere, because that is key. You need to keep the communication rolling and going. And I'd say that, and maybe trying to establish personally some kind of routine to make sure that you're getting your work done. And it's hard in these times, but I think that is important. And finally, be dependable, be reliable. Let your coworkers know that, yes, you're working from home and it's different, but you're going to get done what needs to be done. And I think that building that trust in each other is very important to be a cohesive team.
Thank you. And in closing, how about you, Stephanie?
I would say communicate, and communicate often. And in addition to that, which I've said several times already, I'm sure, but in addition to that, focus on one another as individuals and not just coworkers. I find that personal level of your relationship allows you to work better together. So like Walt mentioned, and like I think Kim mentioned, we use the Hangout chat very often. We actually have a water cooler chat room. So because we're not in person and you don't have those casual conversations like Walt was mentioning about Monday Night Football, we have a water cooler chat room where we talk about the things that aren't necessarily work related, and that allows all of us to connect on a more personal level. And then also we do have our offsite meetings where we all travel to one location once or twice a year to see each other face to face. And I find that just really helps everyone connect. I started with the company, and about 3 months after I started was when I attended my first offsite. And returning home after that offsite and getting back online virtually and working with my coworkers, I just felt like we connected on such a better level. I felt like I worked better with them. We understood one another better because we weren't just talking work. We weren't just seeing each other over screen, but we now knew a little bit about each other. We may have met each other's children or each other's spouses, or maybe took a yoga class together. And that just really takes things to the next level as a team. And I think Kim was the one that said it just makes you more like family. And I think that can be a game changer.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Doing our offsites, whether twice a year or once a year, is critical, because working virtually is excellent, but there are ways to enhance it and make it continue to be excellent. So I appreciate those comments. Well, for those who are attending our meeting today, we are concluding our panel discussion, but what we did want to do is address the questions that some of you had posted in our Q&A in the feature on the webinar. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Walt, and he's going to pose those questions and answer them, and then maybe engage with some of our panelists to see if they have some additional answers to provide. So I'll turn that over to you, Walt.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Liz. So I've been monitoring the questions. So thanks for everybody who is who've been challenging us and asking some great questions. So I'm going to answer one personally, and then I'm going to throw one at our panelists. So one of the questions was, what is the most effective way to ramp up someone who's joining a virtual team and does not have a lot of experience working in a virtual work environment? So as the director of analytics capability, that's my job here at CANA, is to get everybody up to speed with working virtually. And how we do that is we have a day one experience, we actually have a week one experience, we have a month one experience. And how this has been most effective is you do it one-on-one. So each person is going to come with a skill set and a familiarity with the tools. So some folks are very strong. They've been using Google in their personal lives and are very familiar with a lot of the online tools such as Gmail and GCal and such. Some folks have never used these tools. So we do very personalized training to get folks team members up to speed on day one, so they can at least use Google Chat and Google Hangouts Meet. So those are two big things for us.
Opening Hangouts.
Oh, there we go. My phone wants to open a Hangout. So we also, in week one and month one experience, we basically review and reinforce those things that people have now had a chance to use. And so there may be additional questions and such. And I hate to give this answer because I know everybody's going to cringe. It typically takes somebody at least like 2 to 6 months, depending upon their experience level, to feel very comfortable working virtually. And that, you know, is highly dependent upon their work environment, how familiar they are with the tools. And like many of the panelists have said, you know, if they can get into a daily routine and such. So it takes a lot of experimentation. It takes a lot of collaboration between the CANA team members and that person. So yeah, unfortunately, it's not a one size fits all. And I wish we could say that we had a special magic program in a week, somebody was up to speed, but that unfortunately it takes time. And, you know, and like I mentioned before, everybody's a little individual. So with that, I'm going to pose this other question to the panelists. What are some of the personal productivity systems that you put in place to maintain productivity? So any tips or tricks there? And we'll start out with Stephanie on this one.
Sure. Thanks, Walt. For me personally, it's having a list. Always having a list of the tasks that you need to get done for that day or for that week. And so that no matter what your distractions might be, whether it be kids home from school or a doorbell or a dog that needs to be fed lunch, that you always have that list right there so that when you do come back to your virtual workspace, you know exactly where you left off and you can just jump right back in.
I'll chime in real fast. I would say that the calendar feature that we have is incredibly important, not only for my own planning and reminders, but also I can see every single person on our teams. I can select, so I obviously don't have every single person's calendar showing on mine. So when it comes to trying to schedule those important meetings that require a web-based presence, or if it's that phone call, so I find that the calendar feature is crucial. I'd also say, somewhat unrelated, is that at 2 o'clock almost every day I work out. And if it's just a short workout, and it's that drives my productivity because it gets me that outlet. And then I usually come back for a couple more hours. But those are my 2 cents. I'll pass it on.
Thanks. How about you, Joe?
Well, for me personally, I plan on forgetting everything I need to do. And I organize in a way so I can afford to forget. So things come in front of me when needed. So, I mean, there'll be times where I get out of one meeting and I'll have another video conference, maybe in 20 minutes, and I will literally set an alarm 2 minutes before the meeting so I don't forget, because I very frequently will get pulled into something. And I'll do that you can do it via HomePod or Alexa, just say, you know, remind me at, 2 minutes before this meeting to sound an alert, things like that. So that helps me internally. Right. Externally, with coworkers, let's say something we're discussing on a Friday afternoon that something's due at 10 a.m. on Monday. What I'll do is, it doesn't make sense to send an email on Friday. Remember, this is due at 10 a.m. on Monday, because I'm going to forget about it. He or she is going to forget about it. So the Google Gmail has a feature to send an email later. So maybe I'll send it at 8 a.m. On Monday morning, say, hey, don't forget this is due at 10 a.m. Right? So that way it comes in front of the coworker at the right time, just like I do for myself. So those are some of my little hacks.
Cool. How about you, Kim?
For me, I'm very much like Stephanie. I have a weekly to-do list that I track in Evernote. That's another tool that we use. But then things change from day to day. So at the end of every day, I make a list of what I know I need to get done tomorrow, and a list that has my meetings. And they're just little handwritten notes that when I get up in the morning, I have it all laid out in front of me. So I make sure I touch on those very important tasks or things that people are relying on me to get done for them. So that is my main way of keeping on track. Another thing, like I said, I'm routine. And so I try to start at the same time every day. I try to finish at the same time every day. And I take a break, kind of like Liz said, to exercise. I might take a break midday to just kind of refresh and keep going. It opens up my mind and it helps me be more productive.
Cool. Well, thanks. And I think with that, we're at the top of the hour. So back over to you, Liz, for any closing remarks.
Yeah, oh, I don't have many, but I just want to say it's a pleasure to be with you all today. It's a pleasure to also just relearn some of the things that we do at CANA that work for us, and that hopefully you who are attending this webinar took away some nice insights and perspectives that are very, very candid, because not everything is perfect and it doesn't fit everybody, but we certainly know that even in this moment, you may go back to working brick and mortar, more traditional, but this gives you a heck of, just more of an aperture on what works and what may not work if something else comes up in life. So this is just another tool in your toolkit. That's the way we see it, even though this is something we do daily. So I just want to thank you all for joining us. I want to just remind that this is the first of a two-part series, and that we do have a second webinar next Thursday, same time, 3 p.m. Eastern. We will be conducting a panel with our clients and our partners and talking through some moderated questions on what their perspectives are, what are best practices for them, and some of their insights into collaborating virtually services in that respect. Finally, if you have any more questions for anybody here at CANA, we have a CANA forum on our website. So it's www.canaadvisors.com. We welcome you to join us there, and we just want to say thank you.